in Taiwan, such a big achievement.
Oh yes, it was a big achievement indeed. Given the fact that I have never ever driven outside of Australia since I got my driver's license. In January 2020, I took a nostalgic trip to my birth town Yuli in Taiwan. Yuli is a small, charming rural town within the eastern valley of Taiwan. It is famous for its delicious noodles, as well as the picturesque rice fields and mountain sceneries. And here are the few things that we did during our short stay. We stayed at a place called Little Town Inn. It's a top-level unit conveniently located next to the roundabout of the town center, with plenty of shops and eateries nearby. The building has lift, so it's great for people who travel heavy. Parking is available too. The building is new and the unit itself is very well furnished with 3 bedrooms, including an ensuite. And it has the industrial chic interior decoration theme, which is very cool, I think. Kitchen and showers are excellent and well equipped. It also comes with all the necessary amenities such as tea, coffee, hotel toiletries, cable TV, and Wi-Fi. Overall, I'm quite impressed, and you can find their link in the description below. So this is the mighty Yuli Roundabout where everything happens. On the right hand side with a sign is a small eatery in one of those miserable, dilapidated black makeshift houses which has been there forever. You will find that this is the feature of many small towns in Taiwan, as the building codes are not well respected over there and people like to improvise with their buildings, as you can see with the buildings in front. So that's why many times buildings in Taiwan are such ugly mess when comparing to Australia or other Western countries. And also signs and billboards are just absolutely everywhere in Taiwan, especially during the time of filming when Taiwan was going through a heated presidential and parliament election. Those billboards with people gesturing are the billboards from the political candidates. And of course, the traffic goes in an anti-clockwise direction in a roundabout which is opposite to Australia. The roundabout has a quite big fish pond at the center. In the beginning, this was a swamp where the underground water surfaces. It was then turned into a roundabout with a fish pond in the 1940s. And from what I've heard, back in those days, it also served as a water source for the fire engines. And later on, things such as pavement, bench seats were gradually added for people who want to hang out at this spot. Once we've settled in, we went out for a walk in town, and what struck me was how everything seemed to have shrunk when comparing to my childhood memory as a 7-year-old, as I have not been in Yuli for at least 35 years. Garfield, who came with me on the trip, not only went to Yuli Elementary with me, but kindy as well. So we set off to explore our old kindy. What you are seeing here is the Presbyterian Church of Yuli, as our kindy is part of the church. Walking through the playground, it's funny how everything was somewhat familiar and yet unfamiliar to me at the same time. And I must say, it's a very weird feeling. Well, in front of us is the actual church, and it is funny how both of us suddenly came to the realization of how small the church actually is. Again, as a 5-year-old, everything just seemed so big to you. To prove my point, this is the picture taken on our kindy's graduation on that glorious day of 27th of June 1981. And now, here is the picture of us 40 years later. By assuming our own position 40 years ago on the very same steps. Well, this is kind of a cool shot which I've been thinking of doing for a couple of years. Now I finally got the opportunity to do it, so I guess it's one more thing tick off on my bucket list. Having ticked off my bucket list by visiting my old kindy, we move on to our next stop, which is the famous Walami Trail. If you are driving like us, you will take the Taiwan Provincial Highway number 30 by going west. You will first take Renai Road to come out of Yuli Township, and then go on to the Batongguan Trail Road. The drive from Yuli to Walami Trail is about 30 minutes give or take. On the way to Walami, you will be going through some beautiful rice fields and the scenery is just superb. However, since I was the designated driver, I was not able to take any photos and videos. So, we have to make do with these screenshots from Google Maps, unfortunately. But these should give you an idea of what it is like. So this is a diagram which I stole from HualienAdventures.com, which I think gives a bit more detail about Walami Trail. On the diagram, the dotted line represents the 13.6 km of Walami hiking trail without vehicle access, which starts from where the car park is marked and ends at where Walami Hut is marked. The gray line is the number 30 provincial highway to Zhuoxi Township, just before Yuli. The Walami hiking trail and this particular part of the number 30 highway altogether are known as Batongguan Gudao, which literally means 8 passages ancient road in Chinese. The reason that it is called ancient road was because this passage was firstly built in 1875 during the Qin dynasty, and it is now on the National Heritage List. However, I'm not too sure as to the origin of the phrase 8 passages, as I couldn't Google any explanation in both Chinese and in English. So this is the car park where you get off and start walking. On the left, you see the sign for Provincial Highway 30, and on the right, a sign in Chinese that says endpoint for car access. We took a photo here in front of the map. And on the left, you see a sign that says Yushan National Park headquarters, as this area is part of the Yushan National Park. By the way, Yushan is the name of the highest peak in Taiwan, and the national park is named after it. The trail itself is carved into the cliff of the mountain, and down below is the gorge of Shugulan River. The weather was fairly warm on that day and humid. So according to this marker here, at this point we've only done 500 meters. And yet I'm already panting like crazy. Here's another shot of the mountain peaks disappearing into the clouds. So the scenery is surreal and very beautiful. Here we took a stop to study the map. The map explains that this is the historical site of Shenfeng Police Station. The name Shenfeng literally means mountain wind in Chinese. The station was in existence between 1920 and 1944. We had a discussion here about how far we want to go down the trail, and we decided that we should only go as far as the Shenfeng No. 1 suspension bridge, which is the first bridge out of the 5 in total. Pretty soon we've arrived at the Shenfeng No. 1 suspension bridge, just to find out that the usual pathway to the bridge was closed and visitors were being directed to go through a very steep and very dangerous temporary detour in order to get to the bridge. You can hear me panting and struggle to go up the steps here. And I thought that I was pretty lucky to have made it across, with my gimbal in one hand and not breaking any bones.
Wow. 哎呦，怎么办
？I normally get a bit of anxiety from having to walk across a suspension bridge. However, in this case, the bridge itself is very modern and it appears to be very well built and sturdy. So that kind of helped in chipping away part of my anxiety. And when I do work on it, I found that it is quite stable, but given that it is still a suspension bridge, you will still get the occasional wobble, and makes it worse if you start looking down to the gorge, as the gorge is fairly deep. So it can be very dizzying if you start doing that. So my advice here is don't look down, keep looking straight forward, keep walking, and don't make any videos. On our way back, we've decided to visit Nanan Waterfall. 38 years ago, when we were in grade 3, we came here for excursion, and we sat around having lunch right over there on the riverbed next to the running stream. Looks like nothing much has changed. However, back in those days, the highway was not built and there was just gravels. And there was no guardrail from preventing people going down to the riverbed. Remember the map I showed you a bit earlier? On that particular excursion, we actually walked all the way from Yuli Township to here. There was no such thing as bus back in those days for us, and we went everywhere on foot. Looking back now, it was and still is a really long distance. I just couldn't believe how a bunch of grade 3 kids managed to stay together and walked such a long distance. Here we were just complaining about how the government have sealed off everything around the waterfall. When we were young, all these man-made structures were not here, and you were free to simply jump in and have a swim. How times have changed. For our last stop, we went for the famous Yuli Mian or Yuli Noodle, which is something very close to my childhood memory and have since been made very famous as a must-eat for tourists. While Yuli Noodle is a type of oily Hualien noodles that you can buy from most Asian grocery stores in Australia, the difference is that Yuli Noodle is thinner and it's a lot more chewy and tasty. This is because after the noodle is boiled and drained, instead of running it through cold water, it is manually separated and applied with oil straight away while the noodle is still hot, after which the noodle is allowed to be air dry. It is believed that this water-free process is the reason that has given rise to its special texture and the extra tastiness. We can't really talk about noodle without mentioning its soup. The soup is based on pork bone soup, flavored with fried onion, celery, and chives. And the whole thing is served with pieces of pork as the topping. The The combination and the balance of all the flavor in the soup is just perfect. You can swap the noodle for rice vermicelli, and there's also the dry option too. While all the limelight is on the noodle, to me, the real star since my childhood is actually the Yuli Wonton, which is, as you can see, something similar to the wontons from Cantonese restaurants. However, looks can be deceiving. For starter, the phrase wonton is written differently in Chinese, like this. And while Cantonese wontons use thick yellow skin and fillings are generally pork and prawns, Yuli Wonton or Yuli wontons use very thin silky skin, which just integrates so well with the pork-only filling that is perfectly seasoned, giving it such a superb taste and texture. And of course, they are served in the same delicious soup as the noodle. Again, something lacking in Cantonese wonton soup we get in Australia. Well, in a way, I guess you can say that I'm biased since I grew up eating these things. But I think you will agree with me once you try them out. Oh, by the way, this is the name of the noodle house we went to. It is called Hualien's Noodle House. There are tons of positive reviews of this place. However, they are all in Chinese. So this pretty much concludes our visit to our birth town. I was initially planning to go back to Taiwan at the end of 2020 again. However, this whole thing with COVID pandemic makes it impossible for me to leave Australia at the moment, period. So I'm really looking forward for the travel ban to be lifted and to be back in Yuli to tick off my new bucket list, which is to try all the noodle house in town.